The galaxy is vast, ancient, and deeply scarred, a tapestry of stars woven together by the mystic currents of the Force and torn apart by the relentless march of industry and war. On the outer rim, the junk world of Raxus Prime stood as a monument to such devastation. Toxic yellow clouds churned violently under the weight of perpetual, corrosive acid rain. The surface was a boundless, jagged wasteland of discarded technology, the rusted, skeletal remains of separatist dreadnoughts and Republic cruisers from the Clone Wars, now serving as the Galactic Empire's premier dumping ground. In the suffocating gloom of the upper atmosphere, a streak of crimson fire suddenly broke the smog. It was not a failing freighter or a piece of discarded orbital debris. It was a descent pod, sleek, blood-red, and moving with a terrifying, calculated velocity. It ignored all standard entry protocols, slicing through the heavy atmosphere without heat shielding, generating a supersonic shockwave that scattered flocks of scavenging steelpeckers for miles. It impacted the surface with the force of a localized seismic charge, vaporizing a mountain of discarded battle droids and sending a blinding plume of iridescent slag high into the poisoned sky. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop a character name in comments. Deep within the mechanical canyons of the junk world, the impact did not go unnoticed. The tremor violently shook the rusted catwalks of Sector 4, a lucrative salvage claim controlled by the local scrapper guild and heavily taxed by Black Sun enforcers. Garsk, a massive, battle-scarred Trandoshan overseer, hissed as the shockwave rattled his modified DLT-19 heavy blaster rifle against his scaled armor. He bared his sharp teeth, his thermal vision adjusting to peer through the thick, swirling plumes of toxic smoke rising from the fresh crater about a click away. To a scavenger, a sudden impact meant one of two things: an Imperial garbage drop, or an uncontrolled starship crash. Both meant prime salvage, but the velocity and localized destruction of this impact suggested something far more concentrated. Something valuable. Garsk barked harsh orders in his native tongue, rallying a small army of desperate scavengers, a motley crew of Weequay thugs, Rodian snipers, and asthmatic Ugnaughts, all heavily armed and eager for a cut of the profits. They activated their repulsor skiffs, the engines whining in protest as they navigated the treacherous, shifting mountains of jagged durasteel and leaking plasma conduits. The air reeked of ozone, burning Tabana gas, and the unmistakable metallic tang of vaporized starship armor. When they reached the edge of the crater, the scavengers brought their skiffs to a halt, their weapons raised and sweeping the perimeter. The crater itself was a cauldron of glowing, molten metal. At its exact epicenter sat a spherical pod, unlike any vessel manufactured by the Corellian Engineering Corporation or Quat-Drive Yards. It was seamless, composed of an unknown, obsidian-like alloy that pulsed with a faint, angry red luminescence. There were no visible thrusters, no repulsor lift vanes, no viewport. With a hiss of depressurization that sounded like a dying beast, the front of the pod fractured, splitting open like a mechanical geode. Thick, white cryogenic vapor spilled out, rolling over the glowing slag and instantly cooling the molten rock beneath it. Garsk raised his heavy blaster, motioning for his Weequay enforcers to flank the crater. "Whatever is in there," the Trandoshan growled in broken basic, his voice a guttural rasp, "stun it, collar it, and strip the ship. The Black Sun will pay heavily for unknown tech." From the freezing vapor, a figure stepped forward. He did not stumble. He did not cough in the toxic, sulfurous air. He walked with the terrifying, absolute posture of an apex predator stepping into a cage of lesser beasts. He appeared humanoid, looking to be in his late teens or early 20s, with a lean but impossibly dense musculature. His hair was black, wild, and spiked in all directions, framing a face that was sharp, angular, and completely devoid of fear. He wore an unfamiliar uniform, a pristine, blood-red and stark white martial GI made of a fabric that seemed to actively repel the corrosive ash falling from the sky. This was Son Goku. But he was not the gentle, brain-damaged defender of Earth known in another reality. This Goku had never suffered the head trauma that erased his inherent, violent programming. More terrifyingly, his biology was not merely scion. He was born of the Viltrumite Empire, an interdimensional conqueror sent as an infant vanguard to subjugate a distant world, only for his pod to be pulled through a spatial anomaly and violently deposited into a galaxy far, far away. He operated at absolute, 100% capacity. He was ruthless, hyper-intelligent in the art of war, and biologically superior to almost every living organism in this new universe. Goku stood at the edge of the crater, his black eyes scanning the environment. He took a deep breath. The air was heavily polluted, thick with heavy metals and acidic compounds that would liquefy the lungs of a standard human within minutes. To his Viltrumite physiology, it was merely an inconvenience, filtered out by his indestructible cellular structure. He flexed his hands, feeling the gravity of Raxus Prime. It was pathetic. The gravitational pull felt like swimming through thin air compared to the crushing weight of a Viltrumite training world. He turned his gaze to the circle of scavengers pointing primitive, energy-based weaponry at him. His pod had implanted a vast array of linguistic and tactical data into his brain during his suspended animation, yet it seemed none of it matched the dialects being spoken, nor the technology being pointed at him. It didn't matter. The universal language of weakness and aggression was easy enough to understand. "Hey! You," one of the Weequay thugs shouted, stepping forward with a stun baton crackling with blue electrical energy. "On your knees. Hands behind your head." Goku tilted his head, his expression a mask of cold, calculating indifference. He did not raise his hands. He did not speak. He simply analyzed them. Their armor was fragmented plasteel. Their reaction times, based on their micro-movements, were agonizingly slow. They were fragile. Garsk, losing his patience, fired a warning shot. A bright red bolt of superheated plasma erupted from his DLT-19, striking the ground just inches from Goku's boots. The kinetic and thermal energy blasted a small hole into the durasteel plating beneath him. "Last warning, meat," Garsk hissed. Goku looked at the scorch mark, then back at the Trandoshan. A small, cruel smirk touched the corner of his mouth. "You point toys at me," Goku finally spoke, his voice calm, resonant, and entirely lacking the panic the scavengers expected. The pod's translation matrix had finally caught up, allowing him to speak a heavily accented, yet perfectly understandable galactic basic. "Are you the rulers of this planet of garbage? If so, I am disappointed." Enraged by the disrespect, a Rodian sniper to Goku's left didn't wait for Garsk's order. He squeezed the trigger of his long-barrel disruptor rifle. The high-powered energy bolt crossed the distance in a fraction of a second, striking Goku squarely in the center of his forehead. The scavengers paused, expecting the stranger's head to violently vaporize into a cloud of pink mist. Instead, the plasma bolt flattened against Goku's skin and dissipated into a shower of harmless, fading sparks. Goku's head didn't even snap back. The sheer density of his Viltrumite cellular structure rendered the superheated blaster gas completely ineffective. It felt like nothing more than a warm insect bite. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the crater. The Rodian lowered his rifle, his large, multifaceted eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated terror. Garsk took a step back, his reptilian brain screaming that something was fundamentally wrong with the creature standing before him. Energy weapons did not just bounce off bare skin. Deflector shields flared. Armor melted. Flesh burned. What they had just witnessed was physically impossible. "My turn," Goku whispered. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't ignite a lightsaber or call upon the mystic energies of the Force. He simply moved. To the scavengers, Goku disappeared. He broke the sound barrier instantly from a standstill, the sheer kinetic force of his acceleration generating a shockwave that violently shattered the repulsor skiffs and threw the thugs backward. Before the Rodian sniper could even blink, Goku was standing directly in front of him. With a casual, almost bored flick of his wrist, Goku backhanded the alien. The impact was catastrophic. The Rodian's body was launched sideways at supersonic speeds, tearing through 3 layers of compressed starship bulkheads before crumpling into an unrecognizable heap of broken bones and torn flesh 100 yards away. Panic erupted. The remaining scavengers opened fire, a chaotic barrage of red and green plasma bolts illuminating the smog. Goku walked through the crossfire as if strolling through a light rain. The bolts struck his chest, his arms, his face, each one bursting harmlessly against his invincible biology. He reached out and grabbed a Weequay by the throat, lifting him into the air effortlessly. With a squeeze that required less effort than crushing a dry leaf, he silenced the thug's screams, tossing the lifeless body aside into a pool of toxic sludge. Garsk roared in defiance, gripping his heavy blaster rifle with both hands and unleashing a continuous stream of automatic fire directly into Goku's chest. Die! Die, you freak! Goku stood in the center of the plasma storm, his white and red uniform singing slightly, but his flesh completely untouched. He locked eyes with the Trandoshan, his smirk widening into a terrifying smile. Goku bent his knees slightly. The durasteel ground beneath him groaned and buckled under the immense pressure of his muscular contraction. Then, he launched himself. He didn't just jump. The crater exploded behind him as he defied the laws of physics, his Viltrumite ability to manipulate his own inertia allowing him to fly. He rocketed forward like a living missile, closing the distance to Garsk in less than a millisecond. He drove his fist forward, punching straight through the Trandoshan's heavy plasteel armor, through his dense reptilian ribcage, and out his back. Garsk gasped, dropping his heavy weapon. He looked down at Goku's arm buried in his chest, his brain unable to comprehend the sheer, raw, physical dominance of the strike. Goku ripped his arm back, and the towering overseer collapsed, dead before he hit the rusted deck. The remaining scavengers didn't hesitate. They threw down their weapons and scattered, running blindly into the toxic mists, screaming in terror. Goku didn't bother chasing them. They were insects, unworthy of a true warrior's attention. Suddenly, a loud, booming mechanical whine echoed through the canyon. The chaos had attracted larger prey. Descending through the thick yellow clouds was a Black Sun mercenary gunship, a heavily modified, angular Kamar-K-class fighter/transport painted in matte black and crimson. Its twin heavy laser cannons swiveled, locking onto the lone figure standing amidst the slaughtered scavengers. Unidentified hostile, stand down and prepare for immediate termination, a synthesized voice boomed from the gunship's external speakers. Without waiting for compliance, the gunship opened fire. The heavy laser cannons, designed to punch through the armored hulls of light freighters, unleashed a devastating barrage. The ground around Goku erupted in massive explosions of fire and shrapnel, the impact kicking up a blinding cloud of dust and vaporized metal. The gunship hovered in place, its pilots confident that nothing biological could survive a direct hit from heavy vehicle-grade artillery. Slowly, the smoke began to clear. Goku stood in the center of a newly formed, glowing crater. His clothes were slightly singed at the edges, and a small smudge of soot marked his cheek. He wiped the soot away with his thumb, his black eyes locking onto the hovering gunship with a look of predatory excitement. Finally, Goku murmured to himself. Something that might actually put up a fight. He levitated slowly off the ground, ascending effortlessly into the toxic air. The pilots in the gunship stared in disbelief as their sensors failed to detect any repulsor lift technology, any jetpack emissions, or any localized gravity manipulation. The humanoid was simply defying gravity through sheer, impossible biology. Goku rocketed upward, leaving a vapor trail of displaced air in his wake. The gunship frantically attempted to track his movement, but he was entirely too fast. He slammed into the vehicle's forward deflector shields. Instead of being repelled, his immense kinetic mass caused the energy shield to buckle, flare brightly, and shatter like cheap glass. He didn't stop there. Goku collided violently with the reinforced durasteel hull of the cockpit. His fists battered against the armor with the force of repeated orbital strikes. The thick, transparent steel viewport, designed to withstand the rigors of hyperspace travel and micrometeoroid impacts, instantly spiderwebbed and exploded inward. Before the pilots could even scream, Goku tore through the cockpit and into the main fuselage of the gunship. He moved through the interior like a force of nature, ripping apart heavy conduits, shattering support beams, and tearing the main hyperdrive motivator from its housing with his bare hands. The ship violently lost power, its repulsor lifts failing instantly. Goku burst through the roof of the doomed vessel, hovering gracefully in the air as the massive, heavy gunship plummeted toward the ground below. It struck the rusted mountains of Raxus Prime in a spectacular, fiery explosion, sending a massive fireball rolling up into the toxic clouds. Goku floated high above the burning wreckage, breathing in the acrid smoke of victory. His blood sang with the thrill of violence, a deep, ingrained Viltrumite need to prove his supremacy satisfied for the moment. This galaxy was weak, heavily reliant on fragile machines and glowing energy toys. But as he ascended higher, breaking through the dense, low-hanging smog of the planet's atmosphere, his sharp eyes caught something in the distance. Suspended in high orbit, casting long, ominous shadows over the curvature of the junk world, were three massive, wedge-shaped vessels. Imperial star destroyers. They were colossal, silent, and projecting an aura of cold, militaristic order. Goku hovered in the upper atmosphere, staring at the mechanical leviathans. A genuine smile crept across his face. Perhaps this universe wouldn't be so boring after all. He was a Viltrumite, born to conquer, born to fight, and born to rule. And he had just found his first real challenge. The high orbit of Raxus Prime was a cold, silent vacuum, dominated by the imposing silhouette of the Imperial Star Destroyer Vigilance. On the bridge, Admiral Kendall Ozzel stood with his hands clasped firmly behind his back, staring down at the toxic, yellow-marbled sphere of the junk world below. For 3 rotations, his task had been mundane, overseeing the automated planetary disposal units and tracking shipments of raw materials back to the Quat shipyards. It was an assignment suited for a bureaucrat, not a decorated officer of the Galactic Empire. Suddenly, the tranquil rhythm of the bridge was shattered. A sharp, rhythmic chime echoed from the primary sensor console. "Admiral," Lieutenant Trevor announced, his voice tight with sudden confusion as his fingers flew across the light-up interface of his terminal. "We are detecting a massive energy surge from Sector 4 on the surface. Long-range holocom feeds indicate the complete destruction of a Black Sun mercenary gunship." Ozzel scoffed, barely turning his head. "The criminal syndicates are always squabbling over scraps on that garbage heap. Let them tear themselves apart, Lieutenant. It saves us the ammunition." "Sir, you don't understand," Trevor stammered, his face losing its color as he read the incoming telemetry data. "The gunship wasn't brought down by a surface-to-air missile or a rival vessel. Our localized orbital sensors indicate the damage was caused by a single, biological entity. Sensors registered a humanoid figure colliding with the vessel at Mach 3. The object broke through the deflector shields through sheer kinetic force." Ozzel turned around fully now, his brow furrowed in deep irritation. "That is scientifically impossible. No organic being can survive an impact with a capital ship's shield, let alone shatter it. Recalibrate your sensors, Lieutenant, before I have you reassigned to a spice mine." "It's not an error, Admiral," Trevor insisted, his voice rising an octave. "The entity has just broken through the upper atmosphere. It's hovering in the vacuum. Right outside our forward viewport." Ozzel's breath hitched. He stepped toward the massive, angled windows of the Star Destroyer's bridge, peering into the blackness of space. There, suspended in the absolute zero vacuum of the cosmos, was Son Goku. To a standard human, the vacuum of space was an instant death sentence, causing blood to boil and lungs to rupture. To a Viltrumite, it was merely an environment where they had to hold their breath. Goku's lung capacity was vast enough to allow him to survive in the void for weeks without breathing, and his dense cellular structure completely protected him from the intense solar radiation and freezing temperatures. He floated effortlessly, his wild black hair completely unaffected by gravity, his arms crossed over his chest. His piercing black eyes looked straight through the reinforced transparent steel window of the bridge, locking onto Admiral Ozzel with cold amusement. "What in the name of the core worlds is that?" Ozzel whispered, taking an involuntary step back. "A force projection? A Jedi sorcerer?" Before anyone could answer, Goku moved. He didn't need atmosphere to push against, his Viltrumite flight mechanism operated by directly manipulating his own relative inertia. He kicked off the empty air, accelerating with a violent burst of speed that left a distortion in the stellar dust behind him. He slammed into the Vigilance's primary hangar bay doors on the underbelly of the massive vessel. The heavy blast doors, designed to withstand proton torpedo impacts, buckled violently inward. Goku struck the metal again, his fists moving so fast they resembled a blur of white and red. With a horrific screech of tearing metal, the durasteel doors split open, venting the hangar bay's pressurized atmosphere into the void of space. TIE fighters, utility droids, and screaming Imperial crew members were violently sucked into the vacuum, tumbling past Goku like debris. Goku ignored the floating bodies, flying against the rushing torrent of escaping air and forcing his way deep into the hangar bay. As the automated emergency pressure fields activated, sealing the breach behind him, Goku dropped heavily onto the deck. He exhaled a long breath, refilling his powerful lungs with the sterile, recycled oxygen of the Imperial ship. Intruder in Hangar Bay 3, the ship-wide sirens wailed, their crimson lights flashing rhythmically against the metallic walls. "All security detachments, assemble immediately. Lethal force authorized." Within seconds, the hangar doors hissed open, and a platoon of stormtroopers poured into the bay. They immediately formed a defensive perimeter, dropping behind heavy cargo crates and aiming their E-11 blaster rifles at the intruder. "Drop your weapons and face the deck," the stormtrooper commander shouted through his helmet's vocalizer. Goku looked at his hands, completely clean of any weaponry. He laughed, a booming, arrogant sound that echoed over the blaring sirens. "I am my weapon. If you want me to drop, you'll have to make me. Open fire." A wall of crimson plasma erupted from the blasters, a blinding salvo of energy designed to vaporize an entire squad of rebel insurgents. Goku didn't even bother to dodge. He walked forward calmly, his heavy white boots clicking rhythmically against the durasteel deck. The blaster bolt struck his chest and limbs, dissipating into harmless bursts of light. The sheer heat of the plasma began to singe his white GI, tearing away pieces of the fabric to reveal his perfectly sculpted, unscathed chest, but his skin remained flawless. The stormtroopers' discipline began to fracture. They had fought Jedi before, they knew about lightsabers deflecting bolts and the Force pushing them away. But they had never seen a man simply absorb heavy military blaster fire with his bare flesh. "Keep firing. Use thermal detonators," the commander panicked. 3 metallic spheres rolled across the deck, stopping at Goku's feet. They detonated simultaneously, a blinding flash of thermal energy and concussive force that consumed Goku in a roiling ball of blue fire. The explosion was powerful enough to warp the reinforced deck plates beneath them. The troopers lowered their weapons, breathing heavily, confident that the threat had been vaporized. The smoke cleared. Goku was still standing there. His uniform was heavily damaged now, the sleeves completely blown away, exposing his dense, muscular arms. He shook his head, a look of profound boredom on his face. "Is this the best the rulers of the galaxy can do?" Goku asked, his voice dripping with disappointment. "Your technology makes you weak. You rely on these little plastic suits and toys to fight your battles for you." Before the stormtroopers could reload, Goku blurred. He moved through the platoon like a scythe through wheat. He didn't use complicated martial arts, he used the brutal, efficient physics of a Viltrumite warrior. He grabbed a stormtrooper by the helmet and slammed him into another, the plastic armor shattering like glass as both men were instantly neutralized. He executed a low sweep kick, the sheer kinetic displacement creating a wind tunnel that shattered the legs of 5 troopers simultaneously, sending them crashing into the bulkhead. The commander took a step back, his hands shaking as he reached for his comlink. "We need reinforcements. We need the Inquisitors. This isn't a Jedi, it's a... Goku appeared directly in front of the commander, his hand clamping over the man's helmeted face. You talk too much, Goku said softly. He squeezed his fingers together. The reinforced plastoid helmet collapsed under the immense pressure, and Goku tossed the limp body aside like garbage. The entire hangar bay was silent now, save for the groaning of damaged metal and the wailing sirens. Over 50 elite Imperial stormtroopers lay broken and defeated on the deck, and Goku hadn't even broken a sweat. He looked up at the security cameras mounted on the ceiling, knowing the bridge was watching his every move. Tell your leader to send someone worth my time, Goku stated coldly into the camera lens, before crushing it with a pebble he picked up from the floor. On the bridge, Admiral Ozzel was hyperventilating. The holocom feed went dark, but the casualty reports flooding his terminal were terrifyingly clear. An entire platoon wiped out in less than 60 seconds by an unarmed teenager. Signal the Grand Moff, Ozzel ordered, his voice trembling as he gripped the edge of the console. Connect me to Tarkin immediately. And tell the Inquisitorius that we have an anomaly that requires their immediate intervention. Goku began his march through the bowels of the Vigilance. He moved with a purpose, his Viltrumite senses allowing him to hear the rhythmic hum of the ship's primary reactor deep below. He wanted to see how much pressure this giant metal toy could take. Every blast door that slammed shut in his path was met with a single, devastating punch that blew the heavy metal off its tracks, sending it flying down the corridors like a deadly projectile. As he turned a corner into a wide, multi-level ventilation junction, the air suddenly grew icy cold. The red emergency light seemed to dim, casting long, unnatural shadows against the metallic walls. Goku stopped. His instincts, honed by a biology designed entirely for survival and dominance, flared with a sudden, unfamiliar sensation. It wasn't fear, but it was an acknowledgement of power. From the shadows at the far end of the junction, a figure stepped forward. She was a massive, towering alien with gray, leathery skin, clad in heavy, form-fitting black armor and a flowing inquisitorial cape. A curved, circular hilt hung at her hip. It was the Ninth Sister, a formidable member of the Inquisitorius, tasked with hunting down the last remnants of the Jedi Order. Behind her stood 3 squads of purged troopers, their specialized black armor and electrostaffs crackling with purple energy. The Ninth Sister sneered, her heavy jaw tightening as she looked at the half-naked, wild-haired youth before her. She closed her eyes for a moment, reaching out into the Force to gauge her opponent's strength. She opened them a second later, her expression a mix of confusion and deep irritation. You aren't a Jedi," she rumbled, her voice a deep, masculine growl. "I don't feel the light in you. But I don't feel the dark either. You are a void in the Force. What are you?" Goku smiled, adjusting his stance. "I am Son Goku. And I don't care about your Force. I care about who can give me a real fight. Are you the best this ship has?" The Ninth Sister laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Arrogant child. It doesn't matter what trick you are using to survive blasters. Before the power of the dark side, you are nothing but dust." She reached for her hip, igniting her weapon. A double-bladed crimson lightsaber erupted into life with a violent, menacing hiss, the twin beams of superheated plasma casting a blood-red glow over the metal walls. She began to spin the circular hilt, the weapon creating a terrifying shield of spinning red energy. "Purge troopers, immobilize him," she commanded. The purge troopers moved with exceptional coordination, far superior to the standard stormtroopers. They leaped from the catwalks, their electrostaffs humming with high-voltage currents designed to disrupt the nervous system of any organic being. 2 troopers lunged simultaneously, striking Goku squarely in the shoulders with their electrostaffs. Thousands of volts of electrical energy surged through his body, lighting up the dim corridor with purple arcs of lightning. The troopers expected him to collapse into violent convulsions. Instead, Goku simply looked down at the crackling weapons touching his skin. He felt a mild tingling sensation, like a low-grade muscle massage. "Interesting toy," Goku commented. Before the troopers could retreat, Goku grabbed both electrostaffs with his bare hands. The high-voltage energy coursed into his palms, doing absolutely zero damage to his resilient Viltrumite cells. He twisted his wrists, ripping the weapons out of the trooper's grasp, and slammed the heavy metallic staves together. The resulting concussive force crushed the two purged troopers between them, their armor imploding from the raw physical strength of the strike. The remaining troopers backed away, their tactical training completely useless against an opponent who defied every known law of biological vulnerability. The ninth sister's eyes widened in genuine shock. She realized then that this was no ordinary target. She couldn't rely on standard physical suppression. She raised her left hand, channeling her hatred and the dark energies of the Force, and unleashed a massive, concentrated force push directly at Goku. The invisible wave of kinetic energy slammed into Goku with the force of a freight train, intending to launch him down the corridor and shatter his spine against the far wall. Goku felt the invisible pressure hit his chest. He dug his boots into the durasteel deck, his muscles tensing. The sheer density of his Viltrumite mass and his absolute control over his own inertia allowed him to stand perfectly still. The force wave split around him, tearing away the metallic wall paneling and shattering the lights behind him, but Goku didn't move a single inch backward. He stood anchored to the floor like an unyielding mountain. "Is that it?" Goku asked, his voice echoing in the darkness. "You push with your mind because your body is weak." The ninth sister roared in frustration, leaping forward with her spinning lightsaber. She brought the crimson blades down in a devastating vertical arc, intending to cleave the boy in two from head to toe. Goku didn't dodge. He raised his right forearm to block the strike. The plasma blade, reaching temperatures of several thousand degrees, collided with Goku's bare skin. The weapon hissed violently, a blinding flash of red light illuminating the corridor as the superheated energy attempted to melt through his flesh. But a Viltrumite's skin is dense enough to survive the friction of planetary atmospheric entry and the crushing pressure of deep space anomalies. The lightsaber blade stalled, crackling furiously against Goku's arm, unable to cut through his indestructible cellular structure. It was a stalemate of pure physics, ancient Sith technology against ultimate biological evolution. The ninth sister stared at the point of contact, her mind completely fracturing. "No, it's impossible, nothing can block a lightsaber." "Everything can be broken," Goku replied coldly. With a lightning-fast motion, Goku grabbed the spinning crimson blade with his bare hand, ignoring the intense heat, and squeezed. The sheer, immense physical force of his grip crushed the emitter assembly of the Inquisitor's weapon. The crimson plasma sputtered, flared wildly, and then exploded into a shower of sparks, leaving the curved metal hilt completely mangled and useless in her hand. Before she could even scream, Goku drove a powerful knee into her midsection. The impact shattered her heavy chest armor, sending the massive alien flying backward through the air. She crashed through the reinforced blast doors of the secondary control room, collapsing onto the floor in a heap of broken metal and blood. Goku walked through the shattered doorway, standing over the defeated Inquisitor. He looked down at her with an expression of profound dissatisfaction. He had expected a grand challenge from the rulers of the stars, but all he had found so far was fragility. Suddenly, a massive, holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the control room. It was the towering, blue-tinted image of Grand Moff Tarkin, his sharp, aristocratic features twisted into a look of cold, calculating calculation. "Fascinating," Tarkin's voice echoed through the speaker systems, entirely devoid of panic. "An organism that can withstand plasma weaponry and manipulate its own kinetic mass without the aid of a hyperdrive or a repulsor engine. You are an extraordinary anomaly, Son Goku." Goku looked up at the hologram, narrowing his eyes. "You're the one in charge of this metal box." "I am Grand Moff Tarkin," the projection replied smoothly. "And you are currently standing inside an Imperial asset. You have proven your physical superiority over my men, but you are currently trapped within a vessel that can easily be purged. However, the Emperor values unique power. Submit to the Empire, Goku. Serve as our ultimate vanguard, and the galaxy will be yours to police." Refuse, and we will turn the full might of our orbital weaponry upon this sector, vaporizing you along with this wretched planet. Goku stared at the hologram, his jaw tightening. He was a Viltrumite. He was born to rule, not to serve some wrinkled old man in a distant palace. The very idea of submission insulted every molecule of his being. You think your little ships make you masters of the universe? Goku said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low rumble. Let me show you what real power looks like. The holographic image of Grand Moff Tarkin remained perfectly still, his cold, aristocratic expression etched in blue light. A predictable response from a primitive mind intoxicated by its own physical prowess, Tarkin replied smoothly, his tone dripping with absolute detachment. You believe you are invincible because you can break our soldiers and crush our steel. But the Empire does not rule through muscle, boy. We rule through absolute, uncontested scale. You are one biological speck against an industrialized galaxy. With a subtle nod from the Grand Moff, the hologram vanished, leaving the ruined control room in near total darkness, saved only by the flickering emergency lights and the low hum of the dying terminal. High above, on the bridge of the Vigilance, Admiral Ozzel did not hesitate. His hands shook as he punched in the command codes, bypassing standard safety protocols. Activate the localized artificial gravity matrix in Sector 7, he ordered, his voice cracking with desperation. Increase the output to maximum capacity. Crush him where he stands. Deep within the ventilation junction, Goku felt the shift instantly. The air became heavy, turning thick and viscous as the ship's internal gravity wells reversed and magnified. The standard artificial gravity of 1g skyrocketed in a fraction of a second, compounding exponentially. 10 gs, 50 gs. 100 gs. The immense, unnatural weight tore the heavy metal light fixtures from the ceiling, sending them crashing to the deck. The reinforced durasteel flooring beneath Goku's boots groaned, buckling and warping downward as the localized space-time fabric was artificially warped by the ship's powerful inertial dampeners. Any ordinary living organism, even a hardened Trandoshan or a genetically engineered clone trooper, would have been instantly flattened into a horrific, bloody pulp, their skeletal structure pulverized under the sheer, crushing mass. Goku's knees bent slightly under the sudden, immense pressure. He gasped, his dense chest tightening as his lungs fought against the artificial weight. His Viltrumite biology, built to endure the terrifying gravitational forces of massive, high-density core worlds, instantly adapted. His muscles coiled like hypercompressed springs. His heart, an incredibly powerful organ capable of pumping blood through a body dense enough to stop starship artillery, hammered a fierce, steady rhythm against his ribs. He gritted his teeth, a feral, defiant smile breaking through the strain on his face. Is this, your grand scale? Goku growled aloud, his voice vibrating through the pressurized air. He didn't fight the gravity, he overcame it. Forcing his legs to straighten, he stood perfectly upright in the center of the 100G localized distortion zone. The sheer force of his upward movement countered the artificial field, causing the metal deck plates directly beneath his feet to rupture and shatter into jagged shards of shrapnel. He raised his right fist, drawing back his arm as his muscles expanded, veins tracing dark, intricate patterns along his skin. With a roar that drowned out the blaring sirens of the Star Destroyer, Goku struck the floor. He didn't just break the deck, his fist channeled the raw, planet-shaking kinetic energy of a Viltrumite warrior. The strike punched through 20 layers of reinforced hull plating, shattering structural supports, severing the heavy power conduits that fed the artificial gravity generators, and tearing open a massive vertical shaft straight through the midsection of the Vigilance. The artificial gravity field instantly collapsed, snapping back to zero and causing the loose debris to float weightlessly in the smoking air. Goku didn't wait for the ship's automated systems to reset. He bent his knees and launched himself straight down into the gaping hole he had just created. He flew through the lower decks like a runaway turbo-laser bolt, completely ignoring the frantic blaster fire from terrified engineering crews who watched a half-naked, wild-haired demon drop through their ceiling and vanish through their floor. He reached the primary engineering bay, a colossal cavern dominated by the ship's massive hyperdrive core. The core was a towering cylinder of blinding blue light, pulsing with the raw, unstable energy required to tear open the fabric of spacetime and propel a 1,600-meter capital ship through the void. A squad of Imperial technicians and heavy security droids turned to face the intrusion, but Goku was already moving too fast for their targeting computers to track. He blurred past the defensive lines, appearing directly before the central control console that stabilized the hyperdrive's containment fields. With a swift, backhand motion, he shattered the primary terminal, pulling out the thick, glowing fuel rods that regulated the antimatter reactions. The blue light of the core instantly turned a violent, unstable shade of crimson. The ship groaned, a deep, bass-heavy vibration shaking the entire superstructure as the hyperdrive began to catastrophically bleed plasma into the secondary maintenance corridors. Warning, the ship's central computer announced, its automated voice entirely devoid of emotion despite the looming disaster. Hyperdrive core containment failure. Catastrophic explosion imminent in 90 seconds. Evacuate all sectors. Goku didn't look back. He turned toward the outer hull of the engineering bay, drawing his fist back once more. He unleashed a barrage of supersonic punches against the heavy, multi-layered exterior armor of the Star Destroyer. Each strike sounded like a thunderclap, the durasteel buckling, fracturing, and finally tearing open. The explosive decompression was instantaneous. A violent torrent of atmosphere rushed out into the cold void of space, dragging thousands of loose components, tools, and debris along with it. Goku let the current carry him, flying out of the ruptured belly of the Vigilance and into the silent blackness of high orbit. He hovered a few kilometers away, his arms crossed over his chest, his tattered white and red uniform fluttering slightly in the microscopic particles of space dust. Behind him, the Vigilance was dying. The crimson glow from its engineering bay erupted outward, tearing through the midsection of the massive vessel. The Star Destroyer buckled, its spine snapping under the weight of the internal plasma explosions. A spectacular, blinding flash of blue and white fire consumed the rear thrusters, sending massive chunks of burning starship hull spinning into the dark void. The secondary explosions rippled forward, tearing through the hangar bays and finally obliterating the bridge structure where Admiral Ozzel had stood just moments before. The colossal machine of Imperial dominance was reduced to an expanding cloud of glittering space debris and fading sparks, casting a grim, fiery light across the toxic clouds of Raxus Prime below. Goku watched the destruction, his black eyes reflecting the fading light of the explosion. He didn't feel triumph, he felt an unyielding, burning hunger. The ship had been large, but it was fragile. The weapon systems were slow, the soldiers were weak. If this was the true face of the galactic empire that Tarkin boasted about, then this entire galaxy was ripe for the taking, that he would tear down their metal toys one by one until he found someone who could make him bleed. Suddenly, a massive shadow fell over Goku. He turned his head slowly, his Viltrumite senses picking up the deep, low-frequency hum of large-scale sublight engines, emerging from the far side of Raxus Prime's moon were the other two Star Destroyers that formed the orbital blockade, the Relentless and the Stalker. But they weren't alone. Escorting them was a massive, uniquely designed vessel that dwarfed the standard capital ships, a Secutor-class Star Destroyer, its command tower bristling with specialized sensor arrays and heavy turbolaser batteries. From the underbelly of the newly arrived flagship, hundreds of tiny, twin-ion engine starfighters poured out like a swarm of angry insects. TIE fighters, TIE interceptors, and heavy TIE bombers formed into tight, lethal flight groups, their high-pitched mechanical screams cutting through the comm channels as they locked onto the single humanoid figure hovering in the vacuum. Goku's smile returned, wider and more menacing than before. He flexed his powerful shoulders, his bare arms glistening in the starlight. He didn't run. He didn't look for a place to hide. He locked his sights onto the approaching swarm of starfighters, his Viltrumite flight instinct taking complete control of his mass. "Come on then," Goku whispered into the empty void, his voice lost to the vacuum but his intent absolute. He kicked off the empty space, leaving a brilliant distortion wave behind him as he rocketed directly into the center of the Imperial Armada, a lone vanguard of flesh and blood ready to wage war against an empire of steel. The vacuum of space did not carry the sound of the approaching armada, but to Son Goku, the silence was its own kind of symphony. The incoming wave of Imperial starfighters was a wall of black solar panels and gray hulls, their laser cannons strobing with blinding green energy. Hundreds of heavy plasma bolts converged on his position, crisscrossing the void in a deadly web of superheated light. Goku did not flinch. He altered his relative inertia, executing a sharp, supersonic spiral that allowed him to slip through the tightest gaps in the enemy formation. The bolts that did manage to strike him simply splashed harmlessly against his dense, muscular chest, leaving faint streaks of carbon scoring that faded almost instantly against his invincible Viltrumite flesh. He closed the distance to the lead flight group in less than a heartbeat. A TIE interceptor, traveling at maximum sublight speed, zoomed directly into his path. Goku did not swerve. He extended his right arm, rigid and unyielding, and let his own kinetic mass do the work. The impact was catastrophic. The starfighter's forward cockpit disintegrated upon contact with his fist, the entire chassis imploding as Goku tore straight through the engine block and emerged from the rear of the vessel without breaking his stride. The shattered remnants of the fighter erupted into a brief, silent ball of chemical fire behind him, its pieces spinning wildly into the black. Before the remaining pilots could adjust their targeting computers to account for an organic target moving faster than a fleet courier, Goku was already among them. He became a phantom of destruction in the void that he grabbed the wing of a standard TIE fighter, using his immense physical strength to swing the entire starfighter like a club, smashing it violently into a second twin-ion engine craft. The dual explosion cast a brilliant orange glow over his face, his black eyes wide with the raw exhilaration of battle. This was what he was engineered for. The Viltrumite DNA in his veins demanded conflict, demanded the absolute subjugation of any force that dared to stand against him. High above the dogfight, on the bridge of the Secutor-class flagship, the Tyrant, an Imperial tactical officer stared at his display screen in utter disbelief. The green blips representing their elite starfighter squadrons were vanishing by the dozens every minute. "Command," the officer reported, his voice cracking with panic into his headset, "the target is," he's ripping through the fighter screens with his bare hands. Traditional targeting locks cannot track his trajectory. He's utilizing the debris as physical shields and striking our bombers from their blind spots. A tall, imposing figure stepped forward from the command walkway, the heavy black boots clicking firmly against the pristine floor. It was not an ordinary naval officer. Clad in the dark, ceremonial armor of the Inquisitorius, the Grand Inquisitor peered out of the forward viewport, his pale, yellow eyes narrowing as he watched the distant flashes of exploding starfighters. Unlike his fallen subordinate, the Ninth Sister, he did not mistake this entity for a simple Jedi survivor. He could feel the absolute absence of the Force within Goku, a terrifying, localized vacuum that seemed to defy the natural order of the cosmos. "Cease the starfighter assault," the Grand Inquisitor commanded, his voice a cold, calculated rasp that commanded immediate obedience. "They are merely providing him with kinetic ammunition. Coordinate with the Relentless and the Stalker. Activate their forward tractor beam arrays. Pin him down in the crosshairs of our primary turbolaser batteries. If he cannot be turned into an asset for the Emperor, he will be reduced to subatomic ash." The orders were executed instantly. The two Standard Star destroyers shifted their positions, their massive forward profiles angling toward the center of the debris field. Crimson energy beams. The invisible, high-intensity gravitational grids of the ship's tractor beams, locked onto Goku simultaneously from two different vectors. Goku felt the sudden, massive drag on his body. It felt as though the very fabric of space had turned into thick, solid amber, binding his limbs and fighting against his flight mechanics. He stopped his forward momentum, hovering in place as the twin tractor beams exerted millions of tons of gravitational pull, dragging him toward the firing lines of the Imperial capital ships. "Target secured," the tactical officer announced on the bridge of the Tyrant. "All primary batteries, fire at will." The flanks of the three massive star destroyers erupted in a synchronized barrage. Heavy turbolaser turrets, designed to melt the planetary shields of defiant worlds, unleashed a cataclysmic torrent of green plasma. Dozens of city-block-sized energy bolts converged on the single spot where Goku was pinned, creating a blinding, continuous explosion that illuminated the dark side of Raxus Prime's moon like a newborn star. The sheer thermal and kinetic energy of the localized bombardment was enough to warp the local gravitational field, vaporizing the surrounding starfighter debris into pure atomic dust. For a full 30 seconds, the relentless bombardment continued, painting the void in a brilliant, terrifying green light. Inside the epicenter of the plasma storm, Goku was experiencing the closest thing to a challenge he had faced since his arrival. The sheer heat of the turbolasers was intense enough to completely incinerate his damaged white and red GI, leaving him clad only in the tattered remains of his dark combat trousers. His skin was burning, turning a deep, angry crimson as the superheated energy tested the absolute limits of his Viltrumite endurance. The pressure of the twin tractor beams combined with the concussive force of the explosions was trying to crush his skull and cave in his chest. But a Viltrumite thrives under pressure. The pain did not break him, it infuriated him. Goku roared, the sound trapped within his own throat but his intent vibrating through his very muscles. He forced his arms outward, his veins bulging violently beneath his skin as he fought against the invisible gravitational chains holding him in place. With an immense, desperate exertion of physical power, he grabbed the invisible streams of the tractor beams with his own localized inertial control, twisting his body with such velocity that he artificially bent the gravitational fields back toward their sources. On the bridges of the Relentless and the Stalker, the automated systems began to scream. "Sir! The tractor beam projectors are overloading," an engineer shouted. "The target is pulling back. He's dragging the ships." Before the crews could cut the power, Goku accelerated. He used the very pull of the tractor beams to propel himself forward at speeds shattering his previous records, crossing the distance between himself and the Relentless in a fraction of a second. He hit the forward prow of the Star Destroyer like a solid Durasteel meteor. The wedge-shaped bow of the capital ship split open upon impact. Goku did not stop. He converted his entire body into a drilling projectile, flying straight through the internal decks of the ship, severing the main structural spine, and exiting through the massive primary thrusters at the rear. The Relentless buckled violently, its center section collapsing inward before the entire vessel erupted into a chain of catastrophic explosions, breaking apart into two massive, burning husks. Goku hovered in the shadow of the burning wreck, his chest heaving as he took a moment to recover his breath, his bare skin glistening with sweat and the residue of the plasma fire. He turned his gaze toward the tyrant, his expression entirely devoid of mercy. The Galactic Empire had shown him its scale, and he had shown them the true meaning of power. The destruction of the Relentless sent a physical shockwave of displaced gas and metal fragments screaming across the vacuum, rattling against the heavy shields of the remaining Imperial vessels. On the bridge of the Secutor-class flagship, the Tyrant, the silence was heavy, broken only by the frantic clicks of terminal keys and the shallow, terrified breathing of the bridge crew. Grand Moff Tarkin's blue holographic image flickered back to life on the primary projector, his face no longer a mask of absolute detachment. His eyes were wide, staring at the telemetry data that detailed the complete obliteration of two Imperial Star Destroyers by a single, bare-chested humanoid creature. Grand Inquisitor, Tarkin's voice echoed through the channel, losing its usual icy composure. This is no longer a localized security breach. This entity is a threat to the stability of the entire Outer Rim. The Emperor has been notified of these events. He demands this creature be neutralized or contained immediately. If Raxus Prime must become a barren rock of molten slag to ensure his death, you have the authority to initiate a planetary bombardment. The Grand Inquisitor did not look at the hologram. His yellow eyes remained locked onto the small, dark speck floating amidst the burning, glittering ruins of the Imperial fleet. A planetary bombardment will not suffice, Grand Moff, the Inquisitor responded smoothly, his voice a calculated hiss. He survives the vacuum. He walks through turbolaser fire. To kill a being that operates completely outside the laws of the Force, we must use the tools of the mind, not the tools of the foundry. Prepare the gravity well projectors on the Stalker. We will trap him in a cage of pure physical law. Out in the void, Goku floated with his arms hanging loosely at his sides. His chest heaved, his powerful lungs drawing upon the residual oxygen pockets trapped within the expanding debris of the relentless. The heat of the turbolaser barrage had burned away his upper uniform entirely, leaving his dense, heavily muscled torso exposed to the stars. A few superficial scuffs and black carbon marks smudged his pale skin, but his Viltrumite cells were already regenerating, weaving back together with terrifying efficiency. He wiped a drop of dark crimson blood from his lip, the first time he had bled since his pod left the Viltrumite vanguard frontier. He looked at the blood on his thumb, and a deep, booming laugh vibrated through his chest. Good, Goku muttered to himself, his voice lost to the vacuum but his expression a declaration of war. You can actually make me feel something. Let's see what else you have. Before he could launch himself toward the tyrant, a sudden, blinding flash of purple light erupted from the Stalker, the second Standard Star destroyer hovering nearby. The ship had activated its experimental gravity well projectors, massive, spherical domes built into the vessel's superstructure designed to simulate the gravity of a massive star, preventing starships from escaping into hyperspace. But the engineers had modified the output. The gravity fields weren't projecting outward into a wide cone, they were being focused into a tight, microscopic point directly centered on Goku's coordinates. The spatial fabric around Goku warped violently. The gravity skyrocketed past 100 GS, past 500 GS, instantly reaching a staggering 1,000 times the baseline gravity of a standard world. The transition was so sudden and absolute that Goku's flight mechanism stalled. The invisible, crushing mass of a localized black hole seemed to drop onto his shoulders. He was violently dragged downward, his body plummeting toward the surface of Raxus Prime's moon like a stone dropped from a skyscraper. He slammed into the rocky, desolate surface of the moon with a supersonic impact, creating a crater over a mile wide. The gray lunar dust and jagged boulders exploded outward in a massive ring of debris, but the gravity field did not let up. It continued to press down on him, pinning him to the center of the crater floor with millions of tons of continuous, artificial weight. Goku lay on his back, his muscles locking up as his Viltrumite biology fought a desperate battle against pure, simulated physics. The gravity was so intense that the air inside his lungs was forcibly squeezed out through his teeth. His dense bones, capable of withstanding planetary impacts, began to creak, the sound vibrating through his ears. His vision blurred, turning a dark, dangerous shade of purple as the intense pressure tried to prevent his blood from reaching his brain. He gritted his teeth so hard they began to fracture, a low, guttural growl escaping his throat. You, arrogant, insects. Goku hissed, his fingers clawing into the solid rock of the moon, shattering the stone into dust under his grip. Above the crater, a heavy shadow blocked out the distant stars. The tyrant descended into the moon's thin atmosphere, its massive underbelly hovering just a few kilometers above Goku's trapped form. From the primary hangar bay, a massive, reinforced containment capsule was lowered by heavy crane cables. The capsule was constructed from thick, layered plates of pure Beskar, the legendary, lightsaber-resistant Mandalorian iron, mined from the deep worlds of the Outer Rim and reinforced with continuous, internal energy barriers. The Grand Inquisitor, flanked by a dozen purge troopers and a contingent of heavy security droids, dropped from the transport skiff, landing at the edge of the crater. The artificial gravity field was carefully calibrated to leave a narrow pathway for the execution squad while keeping Goku completely immobilized at the center. The Inquisitor walked down the sloping walls of the crater, his black cape billowing behind him in the localized atmospheric turbulence caused by the gravity wells. He stopped just 10 paces from Goku, looking down at the struggling Viltrumite with an expression of cold, academic curiosity. A magnificent specimen, the Grand Inquisitor murmured, his yellow eyes tracking the pulsing veins on Goku's chest. Your density is unparalleled. Your resilience defies every metric our scientists have established. But you are a prisoner of your own biology, boy. No matter how strong your muscles are, they must still obey the laws of mass and gravity. You cannot fly if space itself is pulling you down. Goku managed to turn his head, his black eyes blazing with a feral, unyielding hatred. He could feel the immense weight pressing on every square millimeter of his skin, but he also felt something else, his Viltrumite rage. His species did not submit. They did not lie in the dirt for lesser beings. They conquered, or they died in a mountain of their enemies' corpses. I am going to tear your head off. Goku growled, each word costing him an immense amount of energy. The Grand Inquisitor smiled, a cruel, thin line on his pale face. He gestured to a nearby terminal held by a purge trooper. Activate the secondary array. Let us see how much mass his skull can withstand before it collapses. Before the trooper could press the command key, a loud, static-filled transmission broke through all Imperial comlink channels. It didn't come from the flagship, nor did it come from Coruscant. It came from a fleet of unidentified vessels that had just exited hyperspace on the perimeter of the sector. Attention Imperial vessels, a deep, resonant voice boomed over the airwaves, speaking in a dialect that carried the ancient, warlike cadences of Mandalore. This is Clan Cries. You are operating heavy gravity machinery within our designated patrol sectors without sector clearance. Turn off your gravity wells and prepare to be boarded, or we will treat your presence as an act of open aggression. The Grand Inquisitor's head snapped up, his brow furrowing in irritation. Mandalorians, he hissed. A dying race of mercenaries. Ignore them. Secure the asset. But the distraction was all Goku needed. The sudden deployment of the Mandalorian fleet caused a microscopic fluctuation in the Stalker's power grid as its secondary sensors adjusted to track the new arrivals. For a fraction of a microsecond, the intensity of the gravity well projector dropped by a mere 5%. To a standard human, 5% was nothing. To a Viltrumite operating at absolute capacity, it was an open door. Goku's eyes flared with a brilliant, predatory light. He took a massive, deep breath, his chest expanding to twice its normal size as he drew in the residual air. He didn't just push against the gravity, he unleashed his entire kinetic reserves in a single, explosive burst of absolute physical violence. The moon beneath him didn't just crack, it shattered. A massive, tectonic fissure ripped through the center of the crater, splitting the local valley in two as Goku launched himself upward, defying the 1000G field through sheer, unadulterated muscle mass. He rose like a red and white demon from the pit, the sonic boom of his acceleration generating a shockwave that threw the Grand Inquisitor and his purge troopers backward into the jagged rocks. Goku didn't fly toward the Inquisitor. He flew straight up, his target the Stalker, the Star Destroyer projecting the gravity field. The crew of the Stalker watched in horror on their tracking screens as the red blip rose from the moon's surface at Mach 10, completely ignoring the crushing weight of their own gravity wells. Sir! He's incoming! He's bypassing our forward shields, the tactical officer screamed. Goku slammed into the underbelly of the Stalker right where the primary gravity well projector dome was located. He didn't use a fist, he used his entire body as a solid, planet-cracking projectile. He tore through the heavy defensive shielding, through 4 layers of reinforced hull plating, and straight into the core of the gravity generator. The resulting explosion was catastrophic. The artificial gravity wells, suddenly stripped of their containment fields, folded inward on themselves. The massive Star Destroyer began to implode, its outer hull buckling and twisting like wet paper as the artificial black hole crushed the center of the vessel into a dense, compact mass of metal and flesh. The ship collapsed into a silent, swirling vortex of scrap before exploding outward in a final, brilliant flash of blue plasma. Goku emerged from the fire, hovering high above the ruins of the Stalker. His skin was scorched black in places, his dark trousers torn to shreds, but his posture was that of a king standing over his kingdom. The gravity field was gone. The air was clear. He turned his gaze down toward the moon, where the Grand Inquisitor was scrambling back to his feet, his pale face twisted into a mask of genuine, unadulterated terror. Goku smiled, a long, slow, terrifying line that promised absolute destruction. He was a Viltrumite, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you tried to put a god in a cage. The catastrophic implosion of the stalker painted the gray dust of the desolate moon in a fleeting, brilliant blue light. High above, the shattered remnants of the vessel twisted in the silent void, colliding with drifting orbital junk and sending a fresh rain of micrometeoroids down upon the lunar surface. Goku hovered in the thin, artificial atmosphere created by the expanding gases of the dead capital ship. His chest rose and fell in a slow, rhythmic pattern, his lungs adapting instantly to the sparse, freezing atmosphere. The black soot and carbon scoring that covered his powerful arms and torso began to flake away, falling off like old skin to reveal the pristine, pale white Viltrumite flesh underneath. He looked down at the Grand Inquisitor, who was now desperately scrambling toward his transport skiff, his black cape torn and coated in gray lunar dust. With a single, effortless twitch of his leg muscles, Goku broke the sound barrier, dropping from the sky like a falling star. He landed directly in front of the escaping Inquisitor, his heavy boots impacting the rocky ground with a concussive thud that cracked the stone for 50 meters in every direction. The sheer displacement of air threw the surrounding purge troopers off their feet, their specialized black armor clattering against the jagged rocks. The Grand Inquisitor froze. His yellow eyes, usually filled with the cold, arrogant assurance of the dark side, dilated with absolute panic. He reached for his hip, igniting his double-bladed lightsaber, the twin crimson beams hissing violently into life as he assumed a defensive stance. But his hands were shaking. He had spent his life hunting Jedi who fought with rules, philosophy, and balance. He had never faced a being that was simply an absolute, unyielding wall of physical force. "You are an abomination," the Inquisitor hissed, his voice losing its calculated rasp and rising to a desperate pitch. "The Emperor will see you erased from the stars. The dark side will swallow you whole." "Your Emperor isn't here," Goku said softly, his voice carrying the deep, resonant authority of a conqueror. "And your little red stick can't save you." The Grand Inquisitor screamed, lunging forward with a flurry of strikes, his crimson blade spinning in a blinding wheel of superheated plasma. He targeted Goku's neck, his joints, his chest, every lethal vulnerability known to humanoid biology. Goku didn't even bother to raise his arms to parry. He simply stepped into the storm. The crimson plasma blade struck Goku's chest, sparking furiously against his bare skin. The intense heat, reaching thousands of degrees, singed the fine hairs on his torso but failed to penetrate his indestructible cellular walls. The blades groaned under the resistance, the energy fields within the lightsaber hilt sputtering and flaring wildly as they met an object they could not cut. Goku stood perfectly still, looking down at the Inquisitor with an expression of profound pity. With a lightning-fast motion, Goku reached out and grabbed the Grand Inquisitor by the face. His massive fingers clamped over the leathery gray skin, his thumb pressing into the alien's temple. The crimson lightsaber fell from the Inquisitor's grasp, deactivating as it hit the dirt. "Let go of him," a purge trooper shouted, charging forward with an electrostaff crackling with purple energy. Without looking, Goku swung his left arm backward. The backhand strike was so fast it created a small vacuum. His knuckles connected with the trooper's chest plate, and the reinforced plastoid armor instantly imploded. The trooper was launched backward at 3 times the speed of sound, his body skipping across the moon's surface like a stone on water before exploding into a cloud of metal and bone fragments a kilometer away. The remaining troopers froze, their weapons lowering involuntarily. They were elite soldiers, trained to face space wizards, but this was a slaughter. Goku turned his attention back to the Grand Inquisitor, lifting the towering alien off the ground by his face with a single hand. The Inquisitor thrashed, his fingers clawing uselessly at Goku's solid forearm, his lungs gasping for air that wasn't there. "You told me your empire rules through scale," Goku said, his black eyes locking onto the Inquisitor's fading yellow vision. "But scale doesn't matter if the pieces are made of glass. Go tell your Emperor that Son Goku is coming for his throne." Goku didn't squeeze to kill. Instead, he hurled the Grand Inquisitor upward with the force of a surface-to-air missile. The tall alien rocketed into the sky, breaking through the moon's low gravity and flying straight toward the hovering flagship, the Tyrant, crashing violently into the outer viewport of the primary bridge tower. The reinforced glass held, but the Inquisitor's broken body slumped against the frame, a grim testament to the boy's strength. Goku turned around, looking out toward the stars. The Mandalorian fleet that had entered the sector was now closing in, their sharp, predatory Kamar-K-class fighters and heavy cruisers forming a ring around the remaining Imperial ships. They were waiting, watching the lone warrior who had just dismantled an entire Imperial blockade with his bare hands. A heavy, modified Mandalorian dropship detached from the lead cruiser, its sublight engines burning bright blue as it descended toward Goku's position. It hovered a few meters above the crater, its side ramps sliding open with a heavy mechanical hiss. Standing at the edge of the ramp was a tall warrior clad in pristine, unpainted Beskar armor, a dark blue cape fluttering in the engine wash. The helmet's T-shaped visor locked onto Goku, analyzing the half-naked youth who stood amidst the ruins of the Empire. "You fight like a demon, kid," the Mandalorian said through his vocalizer, his tone carrying a deep, unyielding respect. "The name is Bo-Katan Kryze. Clan Kryze. We've been tracking this Imperial fleet for 3 rotations, looking for an opening to strike. We didn't expect a kid to do our job for us." Goku looked up at the armored warrior, his arms crossed over his chest. His Viltrumite instincts, always searching for potential threats or allies of worth, evaluated the stranger. The armor was dense, he could recognize the unique molecular signature of Beskar now, and the weapons were high-grade. These weren't the fragile scavengers or the brainwashed stormtroopers. These were warriors. "I didn't do it for you," Goku replied coldly. "They got in my way. They tried to put me in a cage." Bo-Katan let out a short, sharp laugh. "The Empire tends to do that to anything they can't control. But you're something different. We watched you take a turbolaser to the chest and walk away. That's not the Force, and that's sure as hell not any biology we've ever catalogued in the Outer Rim." She stepped aside, gesturing into the warm, illuminated interior of the dropship. "Our enclave is nearby. We have food, we have medical supplies, though it looks like you don't need them, and we have information about the rest of the Imperial fleet in this sector. A warrior of your caliber shouldn't be standing in the dirt on a dead moon. Come with us, Son Goku. Let's talk about what happens next." Goku looked back at the burning wreckage of the stalker drifting in the sky, then back to the Mandalorian dropship. His hunger for battle was satisfied for the moment, but his strategic mind, implanted with the basic tenets of Viltrumite conquest, knew that total domination required more than just individual strength. It required intelligence. It required knowing where the strongest enemies were hiding. "Fine," Goku said, his body lifting off the ground as he levitated effortlessly into the air, gliding into the interior of the dropship without using the ramp. "Lead the way, Mandalorian. But understand one thing, I don't follow orders. I follow the path to the strongest fight." Bo-Katan hit the door control, the heavy metal ramp sliding shut, sealing out the cold vacuum of the dead moon as the ship roared back into the stars. The interior of the Mandalorian Gauntlet fighter was a symphony of utilitarian design, stark gray Durasteel walls, racks of heavy blasters, and the ambient hum of a high-grade hyperdrive engine. Son Goku sat cross-legged on a metal bench, completely unfazed by the rapid deceleration as the vessel slipped out of hyperspace. His bare torso was clean now, the black soot of the Imperial fleet washed away, revealing the dense, flawless musculature unique to his Viltrumite heritage. Across from him sat Bo-Katan Kryze, her T-shaped helmet resting on her knee, revealing her sharp, determined features and cropped crimson hair. Her hazel eyes studied him with a mixture of professional calculation and deep, cultural awe. To a Mandalorian, physical prowess was the ultimate currency, and Goku was a living vault of it. "We've dropped out in the Mandalore system," Bo-Katan explained, leaning forward to map a holographic projection of a shattered planet between them. "Or rather, what's left of it. The Empire keeps a tight iron grip on our homeworld, but my enclave operates from the hidden orbital shipyards of Concord Dawn. We live in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to sever the Imperial throat." Goku looked at the rotating blue hologram of the planet, his black eyes tracing the severe orbital scars left by centuries of orbital bombardments. "Your world looks like a battlefield," he noted, his voice resonant and entirely lacking the hesitation of a stranger in an unknown sector. "My people would respect that. On Viltrum, we don't build monuments to peace, we build infrastructure for expansion. If you want to take your world back from those weaklings in the white armor, why haven't you just broken their ships?" "Because their ships aren't the real problem, Goku," a deep, heavily modulated voice interrupted from the cockpit walkway. An exceptionally tall Mandalorian stepped into the main hold, his armor a heavy, dented pattern of traditional Beskar painted in the dark crimson and black of the old Death Watch faction. He removed his helmet, revealing a face lined with deep scars and a thick, graying beard. This was Fen Shaisa, a legendary veteran of the Clone Wars who had fought against both the Republic and the Separatists. He looked at Goku not with the curiosity of a scientist, but with the cold, assessing eye of a general evaluating an unguided missile. "The Empire has thousands of star destroyers, boy," Fen continued, leaning against the weapon rack. "You broke 3 of them. A magnificent feat, I'll grant you. The stories of the flying demon of Raxus are already burning through the underworld channels. But Palpatine rules through endless production lines. You break 3, he builds 30 more. And worse, he has monsters of his own. If you keep drawing this much attention, they won't send Inquisitors next time. They'll send the Executor. They'll send Darth Vader." Goku's ears perked up at the name. His Viltrumite blood, wired for apex predator dominance, felt a distinct, pleasant hum of anticipation. "Vader," Goku repeated, testing the weight of the syllables on his tongue. "The Inquisitor I threw through the window mentioned him before he broke. He said this Vader is the fist of your galaxy. Is he strong?" "He's a butcher," Bo-Katan said coldly, her jaw tightening. "A fallen warrior who trades in absolute terror. He wields the dark side of the Force like a localized cataclysm. I've seen him single-handedly crush a rebellion cell without taking a single step forward, using only his mind to collapse their windpipes. He doesn't just fight, he erases." Goku stood up from the bench, his movement so smooth and instantaneous it caused Fen Shaisa to subconsciously drop his hand to the grip of his heavy blaster pistol. Goku stretched his dense arms, a wide, predatory smirk spreading across his face. "He uses his mind because his body is fragile. I've already proven that your Force means nothing to a real warrior. If this Vader is the strongest your empire has to offer, then he's exactly the person I need to find. I want to see if his armor can withstand a real strike." Fen Shaisa let out a low, grim chuckle, shaking his head. "Arrogant brat. You don't know the depth of the ocean you're jumping into. But if you're looking for a fight that will shake the outer rim, you might not have to wait long. Our spies within the Crimson Dawn Syndicate have indicated that the Empire is moving a highly classified cargo through the nearby mid-rim sector of Ord Mantell. A massive Kyber crystal shipment, heavily guarded by an elite Imperial detachment. They are using it to fuel an experimental weapon system. If you want to draw Vader out, destroying that shipment is your fastest ticket." Bo-Katan stood up as well, her armor clinking softly. She walked over to Goku, looking him directly in the eyes. "We aren't asking you to join our rebellion, Goku. We know you aren't a Mandalorian, and you don't care about our creed. But we have a common enemy. The Empire wants to put you in a cage or turn you into a corpse. We want them out of our sky. If we provide you with the coordinates and the logistical support to bypass their outer orbital sensor screens on Ord Mantell, will you break their fleet for us?" Goku looked at Bo-Katan, his mind processing the strategic variables with the inherent military intelligence of a Viltrumite vanguard. He didn't care about their political independence, nor did he care about the liberation of Mandalore. To him, these Mandalorians were simply useful guides, scouts who could direct him to the largest concentrations of Imperial power. They were tools to help him locate the ultimate challenge. "I don't need your stealth screens, Mandalorian," Goku said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low pitch that echoed in the enclosed metal hold. "Just give me the coordinates. I'll make so much noise on Ord Mantell that your Darth Vader will have no choice but to come and face me himself. And when he arrives, you can watch from your hidden shipyards as I tear his empire apart." Bo-Katan stared at him for a long beat, recognizing the unyielding, terrifying purity of his drive. There was no light in him, no dark, just an absolute, terrifying hunger for dominance. She nodded slowly, reaching into her gauntlet terminal to transfer the localized hyperspace lane coordinates directly to the memory banks of his Crimson Pod, which had been securely fastened to the ship's lower cargo hoist. "The coordinates are locked, Goku," Bo-Katan said softly. "May your strength serve you well. Because on Ord Mantell, you won't be fighting politicians. You'll be fighting the absolute limit of Imperial military engineering." Goku didn't reply. He simply turned toward the rear hangar ramp, his body lifting a few inches off the deck as he prepared to launch his pod back into the black void, his heart hammering a fierce, joyful rhythm at the prospect of the incoming carnage. The atmospheric entry over Ord Mantell was a chaotic tapestry of pink and orange fire, a blistering descent that would have sheared the wings off a standard starfighter. Son Goku did not use a ship this time. He dropped from high orbit in his Crimson Pod, but at the apex of the atmospheric friction, he violently kicked the obsidian alloy hatch away. He vaulted into the screaming wind, leaving the automated vessel to crash harmlessly into a desolate canyon below. He floated naked from the waist up, his dark combat trousers snapping like whip cracks against the fierce air currents. Below him, the planet stretched out, a jagged landscape of pink volcanic rock, sprawling scrap merchant settlements, and the massive, heavily fortified Imperial sector headquarters known as the Obsidian Citadel. The Citadel was a brutalist mountain of black reinforced durasteel, built directly over a natural thermal vent network. Docked at its central orbital spire was an unprecedented prize, a modified Class 4 heavy freighter, its cargo bays pulsing with a terrifying, luminescent green energy that leaked through the ventilation grids. It was the Kyber crystal shipment. Hundreds of raw, unrefined crystals, mined from the tragic ruins of Ilum, gathered to power the Emperor's secret military projects. Surrounding the spire was a defensive screen that could pacify a small star system, 2 docked Imperial-class star destroyers, a ring of heavy planetary turbolaser turrets, and 3 elite wings of the newly deployed TIE Defender starfighters, sleek, triple-winged predators equipped with their own deflector shields and heavy hyperdrives. Goku took a deep, localized breath of the sulphurous, thin air. His Viltrumite physiology, wired for high-altitude hunting and planetary pacification, registered the high mineral content with ease. He crossed his massive arms over his dense chest, his black eyes fixing on the green glow of the Kyber freighter. "They built a bigger nest," Goku murmured to himself, a genuine, terrifying smile breaking across his sharp features. "Let's see how many of them can fly." He didn't sneak. He didn't wait for the cover of night or the Mandalorian scouts to create a diversion. Goku altered his relative inertia, executing a downward plunge that instantly shattered the sound barrier. The resulting sonic boom tore across the pink canyons like a localized tectonic fracture, shattering the viewports of a nearby scrap merchant outpost and sending thousands of local scavengers scrambling for cover. On the primary command deck of the Obsidian Citadel, General Calvin, a decorated veteran of the Outer Rim pacification campaigns, slammed his fist onto the tactical console. The holographic display had just gone completely red, a single kinetic signature moving at Mach 5 dropping directly out of the upper stratosphere. "Is it a rebel missile?" Calvin demanded, his voice echoing over the rhythmic hum of the base's shield generators. "Why wasn't it intercepted by the orbital blockade?" "Sir, it's not a missile," the tracking officer screamed, his hands flying across the terminal as he tried to stabilize the telemetry lock. "The profile, it's the Raxus anomaly. The flying humanoid. He's dropping straight toward the primary Kyber dock. All batteries, fire." Calvin roared, his aristocratic composure evaporating into raw panic. "Activate the planetary deflector shield. Do not let that creature touch the freighter." The sky above the Citadel erupted into a blinding grid of emerald light. A dozen heavy turbolaser turrets, designed to repel orbital capital ships, swiveled downward, unleashing a continuous, overlapping barrage of superheated plasma bolts directly into Goku's descent path. The air turned into a roaring cauldron of heat and concussive energy, the thermal displacement vaporizing the clouds and turning the pink volcanic dust into liquid glass. Goku did not swerve. He drew his fists inward, tightening his Viltrumite cellular structure to its absolute, dense maximum. He met the first turbolaser bolt head-on. The city block-sized plasma charge exploded violently upon contact with his skull, but instead of vaporizing his flesh, the energy flattened, splashing off his skin like water off a stone. He tore straight through the heart of the explosion, his pale skin blackened with soot but completely unbroken. He blasted through the second bolt, the third, the fourth, his velocity increasing exponentially as he utilized the sheer kinetic weight of his descent. He struck the Citadel's primary planetary deflector shield, a shimmering, high-intensity grid of blue energy suspended 100 meters above the fortress. The collision sounded like the cracking of a world. The blue energy field flared to a blinding, incandescent white as it attempted to redirect Goku's immense kinetic mass. The shield generators deep within the volcanic vents groaned, their cooling conduits instantly exploding from the massive thermal feedback. For a fraction of a second, Goku's downward momentum stalled against the energy barrier, his teeth gritted, his powerful shoulder muscles bulging as he forced his way through pure electrical law. With a horrific, shattering sound that resonated across the entire continent, the planetary shield buckled, fractured, and exploded into a million fading blue sparks. Goku didn't break his stride. He dropped through the shattered barrier, landing squarely on the upper flight deck of the docked Star Destroyer Inflexible. The impact was cataclysmic. The forward bow of the 1,600-meter capital ship buckled downward under the immense, concentrated weight of his landing. A massive crater ripped through the reinforced Durasteel deck plates, sending multiple twin laser turrets and parked utility craft flying into the air like children's toys. The structural spine of the Star Destroyer groaned. A deep, base-heavy snap telegraphing through the entire metal hull as the ship began to list heavily to port, its repulsor lifts instantly failing under the sudden, massive kinetic trauma. Before the dust from his landing could even settle, the air was filled with the high-pitched, terrifying scream of twin-ion engines. The three wings of TIE Defenders swept over the deck, their advanced targeting computers locking onto Goku's bare-chested form. They unleashed a relentless storm of linked laser fire and proton torpedoes. Target sighted. Eradicate him, the flight leader shouted over the Imperial comms. 6 proton torpedoes closed the distance in a millisecond, detonating simultaneously around Goku in a blinding ball of blue, nuclear-grade fire. The explosion was powerful enough to completely sever the forward command walkway of the Inflexible, sending thousands of tons of burning starship hull collapsing into the lower levels of the Citadel. Inside the Inferno, Goku's eyes flared with a brilliant, predatory light. The pain of the continuous plasma and thermal explosions was intense, turning his skin an angry, pulsing red, but it was a familiar feeling, the exhilarating pressure of a real battlefield. His Viltrumite DNA roared in approval. He kicked off the melting deck, launching himself into the air at Mach 4. He caught up to the lead TIE Defender from behind, his hands reaching out to grab the starfighter's triple solar wings. With an effortless, brutal twist of his wrists, Goku ripped the reinforced wings completely off the chassis, tossing them into the path of a second fighter. The first TIE Defender, now a useless, wingless metal cylinder, violently spun out of control, slamming into the Citadel's primary communication tower in a spectacular explosion. Goku became a phantom of destruction in the Ord Mantell sky. He moved too fast for the pilots to track visually, appearing only as a white and red blur that left a vacuum trail in its wake. He punched straight through the cockpit of a TIE Defender, his fist exiting the engine block before the pilot could even register a shield breach. He grabbed a second fighter by its cockpit sphere, using the entire starfighter as a massive, kinetic bludgeon to smash a third fighter out of the sky. In less than 3 minutes, the sky above the Obsidian Citadel was completely clear of Imperial starfighters, saved only by the raining debris of 30 elite TIE Defenders spinning into the burning canyons below. Goku hovered in the center of the devastation, his bare chest heaving slightly as his lungs filtered the smoky air. He turned his gaze toward the primary Kyber freighter, which was now desperately trying to decouple from the orbital spire and flee into the safety of the upper atmosphere. "You're not going anywhere," Goku whispered, his voice carrying over the wind. He rocketed toward the massive transport vessel, but before his fist could make contact with the hull, a sudden, heavy coldness dropped over his spirit. It wasn't physical gravity this time. It was a dark, suffocating weight that seemed to freeze the very blood in his veins, a malevolent presence that echoed with the screams of a billion dead worlds. From the shadow of the primary Citadel tower, a massive, stark black Lambda-class shuttle descended, its 3 wings folded upward as it hovered gracefully above the flight deck. The heavy landing ramp hissed open, venting a cloud of pure, freezing cryogenic vapor into the hot volcanic air. Out of the mist stepped a towering figure clad in absolute, midnight black armor. His chest plate featured a complex, life support control matrix that clicked and whined rhythmically. His face was a terrifying, expressionless mask of black polished plasteel, dominated by 2 cold, mechanical viewports. At his hip hung a heavy, cylindrical silver hilt. Darth Vader had arrived. The Dark Lord of the Sith stepped onto the burning deck of the Inflexible, his long black cape billowing behind him like a shroud of death. He did not draw his weapon. He did not look at the ruined star destroyers or the burning starfighters. He raised his helmeted head, his cold, mechanical viewports locking directly onto Son Goku. A deep, synthesized, terrifyingly calm voice echoed over the base's external speakers, drowning out the sound of the burning wreckage. "You have broken my ships, child," Darth Vader stated, his hand resting loosely near his belt. "You have slaughtered my soldiers. You believe you are a god because your flesh resists our steel. But you are nothing but an anomaly. A brief, chaotic spark that the dark side will now extinguish." Goku levitated slowly downward, his boots stopping just 10 paces from the Sith Lord. He dropped into a loose, balanced combat stance, his muscles coiling, his black eyes wide with the purest, most intense joy he had felt since his arrival in this galaxy. He could feel the raw, absolute power radiating from the black armor. This wasn't the weak mind tricks of the Inquisitors. This was a true warrior. This was the master of the dark. "I've been waiting for you, Vader," Goku said, his smirk widening into a feral snarl. "Show me what your empire is really worth." The air between the 2 combatants grew impossibly dense, charged with a violent friction that caused the ambient embers of the burning Inflexible to hover weightlessly in the space separating them. Darth Vader stood unmoving, a monument of black dura-steel and unyielding malice. With a slow, deliberate movement of his right hand, he unclipped the silver hilt from his belt. A brilliant, blood-red beam of superheated plasma erupted into the sulphurous air with a low, menacing hum that vibrated through the metal deck. The crimson light painted the terrifying angles of his mask in the color of slaughter. Goku did not wait. The Viltrumite instinct within him, entirely divorced from the mystic philosophies of the Force, recognized only one reality: target, lock, and eradicate. He flexed his powerful thighs, the dura-steel deck plates beneath his boots imploding into metal shards as he launched himself forward at Mach 6. He did not punch with a normal fist, he threw his entire kinetic mass into a straight right lead, intending to punch clean through Vader's chest plate and tear his life support system out through his spine. Vader did not dodge. He did not even raise his lightsaber to parry. At a distance of less than a meter from the Sith Lord's mask, Goku hit an invisible, absolute wall. It was not a physical barrier, nor was it the high-frequency hum of a deflector shield. It was the concentrated, localized manifestation of the dark side of the Force. Vader had projected a kinetic barrier so dense, so tightly woven from his own bottomless hatred, that the spatial fabric around him had effectively solidified. The impact sounded like a detonating proton torpedo. A violent, white-hot shockwave rippled outward from the point of contact, tearing away the remaining superstructure of the flight deck and sending a ring of displaced atmospheric pressure screaming across the volcanic canyon. Goku's fist vibrated violently. His forearm muscles bulging as his immense forward momentum was instantly brought to a grinding halt. His black eyes widened in genuine surprise. It was the first time an opponent had stopped his physical strike without touching him. "Your strength is considerable," Vader's synthesized voice rumbled, entirely unaffected by the shockwave that had just shattered the ground around him. "But it is bound by the limitations of physical matter. The Force commands the space between your atoms." With a sudden, violent flick of Vader's left wrist, the invisible barrier exploded outward. The raw telekinetic decompression slammed into Goku's chest with the force of a falling moon, launching the young Viltrumite backward through the air. Goku spun out of control, crashing through 3 reinforced support pillars of the primary Citadel tower before stabilizing his flight mechanism 100 meters above the burning tarmac. He wiped a smear of gray concrete dust from his cheek, his breath coming in a sharp, excited hiss. He looked down at his knuckles, which were slightly reddened from the impact against the Force barrier. A wide, feral grin split his face. "Yes!" Goku shouted, his voice echoing over the roar of the thermal vents. "That's it. That's what I wanted." Goku tilted his body downward, accelerating into a dizzying, multi-angled assault. He became a blur of white and red, utilizing his Viltrumite ability to manipulate his own inertia to change directions instantly in mid-air without losing velocity. He struck from the left, the right, from directly above, a relentless, supersonic bombardment of fists, knees, and elbows. Vader pivoted smoothly in the center of the storm, his movements precise and economical. His crimson lightsaber moved in a flawless defensive grid, the plasma blade hissing furiously as it intercepted Goku's bare limbs. Every time the lightsaber made contact with Goku's Viltrumite skin, a blinding shower of red sparks illuminated the dark sky. The blade could not cut through the hyperdense cellular structure of the Conqueror, but the intense, concentrated thermal energy, reaching several thousand degrees, began to blister Goku's pale flesh, leaving long, smoking welts across his arms and shoulders. Simultaneously, Vader was weaving high-level telekinesis into his swordplay. As Goku flared to the left to execute a flank strike, Vader reached out with his mind, grabbing a 20-ton piece of a collapsed TIE Defender wing and hurling it at Goku's head. Goku smashed through the debris with a single, casual sweep of his forearm, but the microsecond distraction was all the Sith Lord needed. Vader lunged forward, his crimson blade flashing in a devastating downward arc. Goku raised both forearms to catch the strike, locking the superheated plasma beam between his wrists. The energy hissed and crackled against his skin, the intense heat singing the fine hairs on his arms and forcing a grimace of pain onto his face. "You rely entirely on your physical endurance," Vader stated coldly, pressing down on the hilt with both hands, his mechanical life support clicking rhythmically in the dark. "But your body still requires blood. It requires air. It requires a heart to beat." Goku felt a sudden, terrifying pressure tighten around his throat. It was not a hand, it was the infamous Sith choke, applied with the absolute, crushing precision of a master. Vader was using the Force to directly compress Goku's larynx and seal his internal carotid arteries, preventing oxygenated blood from reaching his brain. To a standard human, death would occur in seconds. To a Viltrumite, whose lung capacity allowed them to survive in the vacuum of space for weeks, it was not immediately fatal, but the sudden disruption of blood flow to his highly active brain caused his vision to tunnel into a dangerous, dark purple. His immense physical strength began to waver, his arms trembling as the lightsaber blade pressed closer to his face. "You, arrogant, machine!" Goku snarled through his locked teeth. Refusing to succumb to the invisible grip, Goku utilized the ultimate fallback of his warrior heritage, absolute, suicidal aggression. He ignored the choke, ignored the burning plasma at his wrists, and drew his head back. With a roar that shattered the remaining transparent steel viewports of the Citadel tower, he drove his forehead forward in a devastating headbutt directly against Vader's polished black mask. The impact was catastrophic for both. The reinforced plasteel and durasteel of Vader's helmet spider-webbed with deep fractures, the internal vocalizer sputtering out into static. The sheer kinetic force broke the Sith Lord's telekinetic concentration, releasing the choke on Goku's throat. Vader staggered backward 3 full steps, his mechanical limbs whirring in protest as his internal stabilization system struggled to recalculate his balance. Goku's forehead was bleeding, a thick line of dark crimson Viltrumite blood running down between his eyes, but his gaze was completely unyielding. He didn't give the Sith time to recover. Goku dived low, grabbing Vader by his armored waist and launching both of them high into the upper atmosphere of Ord Mantell. They rose like a twin missile, breaking through the pink clouds and entering the freezing, low-pressure stratosphere where the air was too thin for standard lungs to function. High above the world, Goku pinned Vader's arms to his sides, his legs wrapping around the Sith Lord's torso as they drifted in the twilight zone of the planet's orbit. "Let's see how well your armor works up here," Goku whispered, his voice vibrating through the direct contact of their armor. With his hands free, Goku began to systematically dismantle the Dark Lord. He rained down short, brutal, supersonic punches directly into Vader's chest plate. Each strike sounded like an orbital bombardment hitting a planetary shield. The delicate life support matrix, the buttons, the switches, the regulation dials that kept Anakin Skywalker alive inside his walking tomb, shattered into plastic and metal fragments under the raw physical force of a Viltrumite warrior. The respirator mechanism failed instantly, a horrific, gasping sound leaking from the cracked mask as Vader's organic lungs began to suffocate in the freezing atmosphere. Yet, even as his life support collapsed, the dark side in Darth Vader did not flicker. It exploded. Realizing his physical vessel was failing, the Sith Lord abandoned all defensive restraint, channeling the entirety of his pain, his hatred, and his bottomless anger into a final, apocalyptic manifestation of the Force. A blinding wave of dark, telekinetic energy erupted from Vader's body in a 360-degree sphere. The raw power of the blast was so immense that it completely severed Goku's grip, tearing him away from the Sith Lord and launching him thousands of meters through the upper atmosphere. The kinetic shockwave didn't just push Goku, it ripped through his muscle fibers, causing internal bleeding and bruising his indestructible ribs for the very first time. Goku tumbled through the pink clouds, his body skipping across the atmospheric layers like a stone on water before he finally regained control of his relative inertia, hovering heavily a few kilometers away from the Citadel spire. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving as his Viltrumite cells worked overtime to repair the internal tearing and heal the deep burns on his arms. He looked up into the darkening sky, searching for his opponent. Through the clouds, the broken, battered form of Darth Vader descended via a crude, desperate telekinetic levitation. His cape was entirely gone, his right mechanical arm hung uselessly from its shoulder socket, and his mask was half shattered, revealing a glimpse of a pale, heavily scarred face and a single, burning yellow eye filled with an ancient, immortal hatred. He landed heavily on the crumbling orbital spire of the Kyber freighter, his remaining hand gripping the silver hilt of his deactivated weapon. He could no longer speak, his vocalizer was dead, his respirator letting out only a wet, failing rattle. But his presence in the Force was still a towering wall of black fire. Goku floated down, his boots touching the opposite end of the spire deck. He looked at the ruined Sith Lord, then down at his own bleeding forehead. The joy of the fight was still there, but it was now tempered by a deep, profound respect. This galaxy was full of weaklings, but this man, this machine, was a true warrior. He had fought to the absolute brink of biological failure without a single thought of submission. "You're done, Vader," Goku said, his voice calm, serious, and devoid of his previous arrogance. "Your suit is broken. Your lungs are failing. If you try to strike me again, your heart will explode before your hand can move." The single yellow eye behind the shattered mask stared at Goku, unblinking, unyielding. Slowly, with an agonizing expenditure of remaining willpower, Vader raised his left hand, his fingers curling into a claw as he attempted to draw upon the dark side for one final, lethal strike. But before the energy could manifest, a massive, deafening roar split the sky. The primary Kyber freighter, its automatic decoupling sequences finally completed during the chaos of the duel, ignited its massive hyperdrive thrusters. The vessel shifted violently, its orbital docking clamps tearing away from the spire where the two combatants stood. The sudden, immense kinetic displacement and the backwash of the hyperdrive engines created a localized spatial distortion, a violent vacuum that shattered the spire and sent the remaining structure collapsing into the burning depths of the obsidian citadel below. The collapse of the obsidian citadel's primary orbital spire was a monument to raw, unmitigated destruction. As the massive Kyber freighter tore its way into the upper atmosphere, the backwash from its titanic hyperdrive engines created a localized firestorm that swept over the black Durasteel fortress. Thousands of tons of reinforced plating, structural columns, and delicate monitoring arrays folded inward, slipping into the roaring thermal vents below. Son Goku did not fall with the steel. He stabilized his relative inertia instantly, hovering amidst the churning pink dust and falling shrapnel, his tattered trousers whipping violently against his legs. His bare torso, streaked with a mixture of dark crimson Viltrumite blood and black carbon soot, glistened under the harsh light of the burning canyons. His lungs pulled in the smoke-clogged air, filtering the toxins with the ease of an apex predator. He searched the debris with his sharp, piercing eyes, looking for any sign of the black armor. There was no trace. The dark telekinetic anchor that had defined Darth Vader's presence in the sector had vanished, masked by the sheer, chaotic energy of the exploding fortress or buried deep within the volcanic fault lines of Ord Mantell. Goku let out a long, heavy breath, his tattered muscles relaxing slightly as the adrenaline of the duel began to recede. He looked down at his knuckles, skin scraped and bruised for the first time in his life, and smiled a slow, grim line of absolute satisfaction. He had not earned a clean kill, but he had earned something far more valuable: verification. This galaxy possessed entities capable of pushing a Viltrumite vanguard to his absolute limits. A shadow fell over the ruined flight deck as a heavy Mandalorian gauntlet fighter drifted through the smoke clouds, its sublight engines humming a low, cautious rhythm. The side ramp slid open, and Bo-Katan Kryze stepped to the edge, her T-shaped visor locked onto the young warrior who stood victorious amidst the ashes of an Imperial sector headquarters. "The Empire is retreating across the entire system, Goku," Bo-Katan's voice echoed through her vocalizer, carrying an uncharacteristic weight of awe. "The destruction of the Citadel and the fracture of Vader's command has thrown the local garrisons into total panic. You didn't just make noise. You broke the spine of their mid-rim authority." Goku levitated slowly toward the transport, his boots touching the metal ramp without a sound. He looked back at the burning crater that had once been the pride of the Imperial military engineering. "He was strong," Goku said, his voice deep and resonant. "The one in the black armor. He fought until his machine body failed him. Tell your people to stop hiding in the shadows, Mandalorian. The Empire isn't an unyielding wall. It's just a collection of fragile glass that needs to be hit hard enough." Bo-Katan stared at him, recognizing that the galaxy had just shifted on its axis. The boy standing before her was not a hero, nor was he a rebel fighting for a righteous cause. He was a force of pure, unadulterated conquest, an independent vanguard who had just declared personal sovereignty over the Outer Rim through the ancient right of absolute physical supremacy. The catastrophic duel on Ord Mantell permanently shattered the illusion of the Galactic Empire's absolute invincibility, sending a shockwave of terror through the core worlds and a spark of wild, chaotic hope across the Outer Rim. Son Goku did not align himself with the Rebel Alliance, nor did he offer his services to the Mandalorian enclaves who sought to use his power as a political cudgel. To a warrior born of the Viltrumite Empire, ideological struggles were the pastimes of the weak. He claimed the shattered sectors of the Mid-Rim as his personal hunting ground, a sovereign domain where the laws of the Galactic Empire were null and void, replaced entirely by the unyielding mandate of his own physical law. Emperor Palpatine, parsing the terrifying telemetry data from the ruins of the Obsidian Citadel from his high throne on Coruscant, recognized that this wild-haired anomaly was a threat far greater than any surviving Jedi Order. The Force could be predicted, manipulated, and turned against itself. The raw, planet-shaking kinetic density of a Viltrumite warrior could only be met with absolute, industrial extermination. Across the galaxy, dark chambers began to churn as the Empire redirected entire fleet allocations and experimental weapon research to catalog, contain, and ultimately destroy the vanguard who refused to submit to their order. Yet, as Goku stood atop the highest peak of a conquered world, his wounds fully healed and his black eyes staring into the endless expanse of the star-filled void, he felt no fear of the incoming storm. His blood sang with the anticipation of a galaxy-spanning war. He had found a universe of steel, of ancient magic, and of titans who could make him bleed. He would tear their fleets apart piece by piece until he stood uncontested at the center of the stars.